It had been a reasonably jam-packed day for me, and it was only evening, but I had to head home to get loaded and watch telly. Also, I wanted to go in a limo I'd been assigned. Having sampled the minibar, I was drowsy, and I dozed as my driver made slow progress through the arse end of the peak hour traffic. We pulled up at the Pelican outside the old orphanage. The kids seemed to be having fun. There were party sounds of children laughing and shouting coming out, and sporadic gunfire, or more likely bursting balloons. An endless procession of elderly twats and young taxpayer couples pushing cheap baby strollers sauntered lazily across the zebra crossing in front of us. It was not without relief that I noticed the green pedestrian signal starting to flash, and then some tiny old bastard with a Zimmer frame started to cross, directly disregarding the directives of the signal. His ancient form was twisted in painful spasm, and there was no way he was going to make it across in time. As he came directly in front of the limousine, he paused to manoeuvre around an artfully placed dog turd. At least I hoped it was a dog turd. This old twat was an unparalleled expert when it came to tardiness, with decades of dawdling behind him, and he knew exactly what he was taking ages to do. He stared straight through the windscreen at us with an accusing expression, but it was completely vague what he was accusing of us. I cursed the vagaries of justice that currently prevented me from having any jurisdiction in the field of traffic legislation. I would have liked to have shot him, you see.
This is reminding me of times in the past when I felt very annoying,
observed the driver. The old fucker finally made the safety of the curb, and I was relieved to see that I wasn't as old and feeble as he was by then. We pulled away from the lights smooth and easy in the overpriced status symbol we were driving in. Suddenly I realised something. I'd been so transfixed by this hideous but out-of-breath procrastinative spectacle that I'd overlooked the ambient sound from the orphanage opposite. It was a birthday party, and I had a hunch, not on my back like the one that tardy bastard just had either, the other kind.
"Stadler!"
I yelled, since that was the chauffeur's name.
"Pull over!"
Stadler rolled his eyes and sharply applied the brake. I smacked my teeth into the back of his headrest by accident. I instructed him. Clutching my hurt gob with one hand and opening the door with the other, I leapt out the side and wiped out a lycra-clad wanker in a bike lane. He went psychopath on the cycle path.
"Why don't you like where you're going?"
he raged indignantly.
"It's Robert Earth Thunder!"
I raged back, expectorating flecks of blood at him, whilst whipping out my piece and smacking him across the side of the noggin with it. He instantly regretted in investing in a stupid, expensive, streamlined helmet that only protected the top of his head. Then I made my way around the back of the orphanage to crouch outside the window for the lights to go out and the inevitable moment. It made my blood boil. The single most blatant and regular instance of copyright violation in history ever. An epidemic that had started in the US, spread to Europe, heedless of language barriers, and now virulently contaminated all continents, including the research bases in the polar regions, where the highly qualified scientists should have known better. Not in Africa quite as much though. I refer of course to Happy Birthday, the most covered song of all time that had been published by school teachers Mildred and Patty Hill in 1893 as Good Morning to All in their book Song Stories for the Kindergarten. The combination of melody and lyrics in Happy Birthday to You first appeared in print in 1912 and probably existed even earlier. None of these early appearances included credits or copyright notices. The Summy Corporation registered for copyright in 1935, crediting authors Preston Ware Orrow and Mrs. R.R. Foreman. In 1988, Warner Chappell purchased the company, owning the copyright for $25 million. The value of Happy Birthday estimated at $5 million. Based on the 1935 copyright registration, Warner claims the United States copyright will not expire until 2030, and that unauthorised public performances of the song remain illegal unless royalties are paid to Warner. I simply could not fathom the psychology of a person who would choose to make the theft of imaginary property the central feature of a children's birthday celebration. The fact that these scum implicated their children in their crimes made me wretch, and indeed, I did at that point choose to make physical my disgust. I must have overdone it at the limo minibar. The hubbub inside began to die down and the lights went out. This was it. The kids struck up with a familiar word and I edged away from the window intending to kick the back door in. It was just as well I did. At that moment the entire window blew outwards, shattering itself, and was followed by a huge ball of flame. "Woomph!" said the fireball, only much more louder and more impressive. The carnage was pretty much along the lines of what you would expect. I assumed that the person who was carrying the cake, lighted candles and all, had stumbled in the darkened room and ignited something highly flammable. It was a scenario more common than one would imagine. In fact, I was sick of reading about it happening. Not because I felt sorry for the would-be criminals, but because it was getting boring. Fortunately, I wasn't at all singed, having been sheltered by my position in the doorway. I decided the most useful thing I could do to help would be to get back to the limo and get it out of the way so the fire brigade could come and clean up. As Stadler drove me home, I speculated on the ambiguous nature of the explosion. Not only had a criminal offence been prevented in itself, but the offenders were now prevented from their inevitable descent into ever-escalating criminality. Given that irony was the organising principle of the universe, it seemed likely that some of the incinerated children would have gone on to become arsonists or pyromaniacs. Perhaps both. You can't cheat karma.